FBI has kept a tight lid on its investigation into Elvis Presley for years. But now, the once classified files are finally seeing the light of day, and what they reveal is deeply disturbing. But why was Elvis Presley under FBI surveillance? And what damning evidence was uncovered in the newly released files? Join us as we explore the shocking revelations, the dangers Elvis faced behind the fame. Elvis Presley wasn't just a famous singer. He was one of the biggest stars the world had ever seen. His name was known everywhere, and people from all over the globe loved his music. Many dreamed of meeting him, hearing him sing live, or just catching a glimpse of him. But with that kind of fame came danger. While the world saw the bright lights and cheering fans, Elvis was quietly dealing with some truly scary moments. At the time, J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI. Under his watch, the FBI gathered a large number of files about Elvis. These secret papers were kept at the FBI's main office in Washington, D.C., and covered many years, from 1956 to 1981. They held private details about Elvis's life and the many dangers he faced. These records showed that there were people out there who wanted to hurt him, trick him, or scare him. One of the most troubling parts of these files was the number of death threats Elvis received. Some people were jealous, some were angry, and others just had bad intentions. There were even criminals who tried to take advantage of his fame and fortune. They came up with dangerous plans to frighten him, and even talked about hurting him. A particularly frightening event happened on August 28, 1970. That day, one of Elvis's close friends got two scary phone calls from a stranger. The caller warned about a possible plan to assassinate Elvis with a silenced firearm. The news shook the friend to the core. Not long after, more unknown calls came in. This time, the caller hinted at a plot to abduct Elvis. Even though nothing terrible ended up happening, these threats made Elvis and the people around him very worried and afraid. But the danger wasn't something that started later in his career. Right from the early days, when Elvis was just beginning to make a name for himself in 1956, people sent him nasty messages. One time, he received a postcard with a clear and chilling message. If he kept performing, something terrible would happen to him. Because of threats like these, the FBI paid close attention and kept careful records of each one. Even with all these dark moments, Elvis stayed strong. He showed the world that while fame could be exciting, it could also be risky. This is just the beginning in the declassified FBI records. What more scandal hit Elvis? Let's find out why they called Elvis Presley a danger to society. When people think of Elvis Presley, they often picture a handsome singer with shiny hair, a charming smile, and songs that made everyone dance and cheer. His performances were so powerful that fans would scream and jump with joy whenever he sang. But what many don't realize is that at one time, a lot of people thought Elvis was a danger to society. They believed his music and the way he moved on stage were causing trouble and setting a bad example. Elvis Aaron Presley was never officially investigated by the FBI like some other famous people were. In fact, he was very open about how much he respected law enforcement in America. He truly admired police officers and security guards. But even with his love for the authorities, Elvis's name still appeared in many FBI files. These records started in 1956, when Elvis became famous, and continued even after he passed away in 1977, with the last file added in 1980. Elvis had a well-known love for collecting police badges. He admired law officers so much that people often gave him badges as gifts. One letter from 1972 in the FBI records was from a man who called himself a police buff, just like Elvis. He wrote to President Richard Nixon asking for a federal narcotics badge because Elvis had recently gotten one, and the man wanted to be like him. In 1971, another letter appeared, this time from J. Edgar Hoover, the famous FBI director. He wrote to Elvis to say he was sorry he missed meeting him when Elvis visited the FBI offices. Hoover thought of Elvis as a friend and a supporter of law enforcement, though not everyone agreed with that view. In fact, just a couple of years before that, Hoover had received a very different letter. This one came from a mother of 5 daughters. She was upset and believed Elvis was a bad influence on American society. She said his dance moves and songs were dangerous for young people and claimed he was causing more harm than anything else at the time. Back then, many adults were deeply worried about the effect Elvis was having on teenagers. They thought his exciting music and lively dancing were stirring up dangerous feelings in young people. A lot of grown-ups believed Elvis was making kids behave badly. One letter sent to Hoover in 1956 by a former Army intelligence officer even said Elvis was a threat to the country's safety. The writer claimed Elvis's stage performances made both boys and girls lose control. That same letter described Elvis's dancing as something close to a striptease while fully clothed, and said his moves looked indecent, almost like he was doing bad things on stage. The writer told a story about 2 high school girls who had Elvis sign their skin. At that time, many parents, teachers, priests, and doctors thought teenagers could be easily led astray by stars like Elvis, whose shows were full of loud music and wild movements. There were even rumors going around that Elvis fan clubs were turning into places where bad behavior happened. Some people accused Elvis of using medications and being a bad person, though most of those stories weren't true. What scared people was that Elvis stood for something new. To many, he was a sign of young people breaking free from strict rules. His music spoke about freedom and fun, which made some parents and community leaders very nervous. During those days, adults expected teenagers to follow very strict rules. So when Elvis came along, swinging his hips and singing songs that sounded different, it shocked older people. Some even said Elvis was evil. The fact that his music was inspired by African American culture also made some people uncomfortable because of the racial attitudes of the time. A few critics didn't like a white artist borrowing musical styles from black communities, especially when it came with bold dance moves and suggestive gestures. In 1956, a newspaper critic from New York wrote that Elvis's performances had brought popular music to a new low. Priests at a Catholic magazine also spoke out against him. Even famous singer Frank Sinatra said Elvis's music was bad for young people, claiming it would lead them down the wrong path. That same year, a big event happened in Jacksonville, Florida. A judge in a juvenile court called Elvis a savage and said he would arrest him if he moved on stage. The judge believed Elvis's dancing was a bad influence on the country's youth. So, during his performance, Elvis tried to stay still, but to amuse the crowd, he playfully wiggled just one finger. The audience loved it, and it made the show even more fun. In the end, despite all the concerns about the effect Elvis might have on young people, he remained hugely popular. Teenagers loved him because he made them feel alive and free. No one else was quite like Elvis Presley. Unsavory influences. Elvis Presley was often seen by many as a bad influence on young people, but he didn't think so. In fact, Elvis believed there were others in the entertainment world who were causing even more harm to America's youth. He wanted the FBI to know about the real problems coming from inside the world of show business. In 1978, the Washington Post shared a surprising story from Elvis's personal FBI files. It revealed that Elvis was willing to work as an informant for the FBI. Back in 1970, when Elvis visited the FBI offices, he spoke about his worries over certain celebrities who, in his view, were leading young people the wrong way. Elvis told the agents to check out the Beatles. He said their messy looks and bold music were having a bad effect on young Americans during the 1960s. Elvis believed that stars like the Beatles were partly to blame for some of the problems facing the youth, and he wasn't afraid to say so. But it wasn't just the Beatles. Elvis also mentioned the Smothers Brothers, actress Jane Fonda, and other famous people. He said these stars had criticized the United States openly and were influencing young minds in a negative way. Elvis even predicted that one day they would be held responsible for the trouble they caused. Elvis admired the FBI director J. Edgar Hoover and read a lot about his fight against communism. But Hoover didn't feel the same way about Elvis. When Elvis met with President Richard Nixon and later visited the FBI headquarters, Hoover refused to meet him because of Elvis's unusual clothes and style. Though Elvis got through all these scandalous times, something worse hit him, and it's bad. What was that? How did he scale through? Stick with us! The secret blackmail in Germany. While Elvis Presley was serving in the United States Army in West Germany in 1959, he faced a surprising and troubling situation. This wasn't the usual kind of trouble for a famous singer far from home. Instead, it was a scary and upsetting blackmail plot that caused Elvis a lot of worry and shame. While in Germany, Elvis hired a man named Priscilla Landau to help with skin treatments on his shoulders and face. These treatments happened in Elvis's private room in Bad Nauheim. At first, Elvis trusted Priscilla Landau, thinking he was a skilled skin doctor, but soon things took a strange and uncomfortable turn. By December 1959, Priscilla Landau started acting badly toward Elvis's close group of friends, known as the Memphis Mafia, who stayed by Elvis's side during his army days. According to biographer Peter Guralnick and FBI papers, Priscilla Landau even made inappropriate moves toward Elvis himself. Priscilla Landau later told Elvis he was attracted to both men and women and shared sad stories about growing up in an orphanage. On Christmas Eve, Elvis had enough. He decided to stop the skin treatments and told Priscilla Landau he didn't want his help anymore. Elvis also scolded him for his bad behavior and the shame it brought, but this only made things worse. Angry and upset, Priscilla Landau threatened Elvis. He said he had secret photos and recordings that could ruin Elvis's career. No one knew if these were real, but the threats scared Elvis. He worried what might happen to his good name. On December 28, 1959, officials questioned Elvis about the blackmail. They found out that Priscilla Landau was pretending to be a doctor. The Army and FBI worked together to quietly solve the problem. Because Elvis had a great military record, they protected him from bad news that could hurt his reputation. To end the problem, Elvis agreed to pay Priscilla Landau $200 for the treatments and $315 for a plane ticket to London. The plan was for Priscilla Landau to leave Germany and never contact Elvis again. He was supposed to leave on Christmas Day, 1959. But things didn't go as planned. Instead of leaving, Priscilla Landau came back asking for another $250. Elvis gave it to him, hoping this would finally stop the trouble. But just one day later, Priscilla Landau called and demanded even more money, 2,000 euros. He said he had given up his medical practice in South Africa to come help Elvis and now wanted big payback. Even though it was stressful and scary, Elvis stayed calm and handled the situation with grace. Finally, Priscilla Landau left Frankfurt for London on January 6, 1960. According to FBI papers, there was no more contact between them after that day. This was a hard time for Elvis, especially while he was far from home. It showed how fame can bring dangerous people with bad intentions. Though he was a worldwide star, Elvis was still just a young soldier doing his duty. Facing this kind of threat added to the challenges he already had. Thankfully, the story ended peacefully. Elvis's forgotten jet. Elvis Presley's FBI files hold many fascinating stories, and one of the most unusual is about his last private jet. This red and silver Lockheed Jetstar was more than just a plane. It was filled with memories of Elvis's amazing life. But sadly, time has not been kind to this special aircraft. Once a shining symbol of luxury and success, it now sits forgotten and lonely in the middle of a hot desert. Elvis bought this stylish jet in 1976, just 1 year before he passed away. Back then, it cost $840,000, which would be over $4 million today. The jet could carry 9 passengers and 3 crew members, flying as fast as 565 miles per hour. Elvis loved traveling in this beautiful plane, enjoying every moment in style. But after he passed away, the jet's fate became unclear. Eventually, it ended up abandoned in a quiet airplane graveyard in Roswell, New Mexico. For nearly 40 years, The jet sat outside under the blazing desert sun at the Roswell International Air Center. Dust covered its wings, the shiny paint faded, and the grand plane slowly fell apart. Its engines were removed, and most of the cockpit's instruments disappeared over time. All that remained was the empty shell of what once was a magnificent plane. In 2017, a businessman from California named Jim Galliardi bought the old jet at an auction for $430,000. He dreamed of turning it into a special display for his equipment business in Madeira. Visitors could walk inside, sit down, and feel like they were stepping into Elvis's world. But sadly, Jim never even stepped inside the plane during the 6 years he owned it. Looking for a fresh start, Jim tried to sell the jet again in 2022. He listed it in an online auction alongside Elvis's personal items, hoping someone would buy it starting at $100,000. But no one showed interest. It wasn't until a Mecum auction event held on Elvis's 88th birthday that the plane finally found a new owner. Priscilla Presley, Elvis's former wife, watched the bidding with a close eye. The excitement was high, but the final price surprised many. The jet sold for only $260,000 or $286,000 with fees. That was far less than the millions it was once worth. This sale marked the end of a long, wild chapter in the jet's story. Let's look at the final days of the King of Rock and Roll. A beautiful but sad goodbye. At the start of 1977, something changed in Elvis Presley. The bright, energetic star everyone loved seemed to be losing his sparkle. The Elvis who danced and charmed crowds now looked different, heavier, quieter, and not quite himself. People close to him noticed, but they kept their worries to themselves. Fans felt it too. The exciting, happy energy at his concerts faded into something slow and sad. Sometimes, Elvis forgot the words to his songs. His strong, clear voice sounded soft and tired, and the sparkle in his eyes seemed to fade away. At a show in Alexandria, Louisiana, he quickly left the stage, unable to connect with the crowd. Sometimes, he didn't even want to leave his hotel room, choosing to be alone instead. Even though things were hard, Elvis kept performing because music was his true love. His health was getting worse, but no one knew. He kept singing, traveling, and working, even when his body was tired. People around him saw a new side of Elvis. He began reading spiritual books and thinking about his past. Sometimes he smiled at happy memories, but other times he seemed lost in dark, heavy thoughts. His cousin, Billy Smith, said Elvis looked happy but troubled at the same time. In June 1977, Elvis released his last song, Way Down. Around that time, a CBS TV crew filmed 2 of his live concerts. Watching those shows later, it was clear Elvis was not at his best. His voice was weak, and sometimes he spoke instead of singing. The high notes he once hit so easily were now hard for him. The energy he was known for had turned quiet and sad. Then, on August 16, 1977, the world was shocked. Elvis Presley, just 42 years old, was found unresponsive in the bathroom of his beloved home, Graceland. The place that had been his safe space became where he passed away. Even though he was rushed to the hospital, it was too late. The king of rock and roll was gone, leaving a huge hole in the music world. At first, doctors said Elvis passed away from a heart problem called cardiac arrhythmia. But many people believed there was more to the story. His family and doctors thought something deeper was happening. Later, an examination showed the true cause. Elvis had taken a dangerous mix of prescription medications. This sad truth showed how much pain and loneliness he had been hiding. Inside Graceland, Elvis's family prepared a beautiful farewell. He was dressed in a white suit with a light blue shirt and placed in a lovely casket. Fans came from far and wide, waiting for hours just to say goodbye. On August 18th, a big funeral parade traveled through Memphis. 17 shiny white Cadillacs led the way, followed by family and friends. It was a grand and loving goodbye to a man who had given so much joy to the world. Famous friends and family gathered for the burial. Priscilla Presley, Lisa Marie, and Elvis's father, Vernon, stood close together, holding back tears. Elvis was buried next to his mother, Gladys, at Forest Hill Cemetery. But peace didn't last long. Just 2 nights later, something strange and frightening happened. Some people tried to steal Elvis's body to make money from a cruel plan. Thankfully, they failed, but the family was shaken and scared. Adding to the sorrow, a terrible car accident happened near Graceland's entrance. A speeding car hit a group of fans mourning Elvis, eliminating 2 young women and seriously hurting another. Because of these painful events, Vernon Presley made a hard choice. He moved Elvis's and Gladys's remains from the busy public cemetery to a quiet, peaceful spot at Graceland called the Meditation Garden. Elvis had created this special garden, and it became their final resting place. A calm, beautiful space where Elvis could finally rest, surrounded by love and peace. How did he get this fame that brought both fortune and troubles to his table? To answer this, we have to go back a little to decades ago, where it all started. Elvis Presley's beautiful beginning. In August 1953, a young Elvis Presley walked into the Memphis recording service, a small studio owned by Sam Phillips. Back then, Sun Records wasn't even officially started. Elvis was just a shy young man with big dreams, hoping to spend some time in the studio. He wanted to make a double-sided acetate record, with My Happiness on one side and That's When Your Heartaches Begin on the other. Elvis later said he made it as a birthday gift for his mother, or maybe just to hear his voice. Some thought he secretly hoped someone would notice him. In January 1954, Elvis returned to Sun for another acetate. This time he sang I'll Never Stand in Your Way and It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You. But no one signed him yet, and his big break felt far away. He tried to join a local singing group called the Songfellows, but didn't make it. He also auditioned for Eddie Bond's band and was turned down again. Elvis struggled to find his place in music, while Sam Phillips was searching for someone special. Phillips wanted an artist who could bring the sound of black musicians to a bigger audience. Mid-year, Phillips heard a demo by Jimmy Sweeney and thought the song Without You might fit Elvis. Elvis gave it a try, but it didn't feel right. Even so, Phillips sensed something unique in Elvis's voice and urged him to keep trying. Then Phillips brought in 2 local musicians, guitarist Winfield Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black, to play with Elvis at the studio. On the night of July 5, 1954, the 3 met. Hours passed with little happening, and everyone was ready to leave. Suddenly, Elvis started singing a blues song called That's All Right by Arthur Crudup. He grabbed his guitar and sang with joy, moving around happily. Moore and Black joined in, smiling and playing along. Phillips felt a magic moment and hit the record button. The sound they captured was exactly what he'd been looking for. A few days later, Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips played That's All Right on his radio show. The response was immediate and loud. People called in, wondering who the singer was. Many thought he was black because of the soulful sound. Dewey interviewed Elvis live on air and asked about his high school to show listeners that Elvis was white. Encouraged by the positive response, the trio recorded another song, Blue Moon of Kentucky, a bluegrass tune by Bill Monroe. They gave it a new twist with a special echo effect that became part of Elvis's early sound. The 2 songs were released on one record with That's All Right on one side and Blue Moon of Kentucky on the other. Elvis, Moore, and Black performed together for the first time at the Bon Air Club on July 17, 1954. They later played at the Overton Park Shell with Slim Whitman. It was there that Elvis showed off his famous rubber legs dance, a mix of nerves and rhythm that made the girls in the crowd swoon. Soon, Moore and Black left their old band to play with Elvis full-time. Their new manager was Bob Neal, a local DJ and promoter. From August to October, they played often at the Eagle's Nest in Memphis. When Elvis was on stage, teens would flood the club, then leave when the house band took over. Elvis grew more confident with every show. Moore noticed how carefully Elvis watched the crowd, adding moves that made people cheer. He was learning fast. Alongside live shows, Elvis kept recording at Sun Studios. On October 2, 1954, he played his only show at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. The manager said Elvis wasn't a perfect fit, but wasn't terrible either. On January 10, 1956, Elvis recorded his first song for RCA Victor in Nashville. His band included Moore, Black, Fontana, and Kramer, plus some background singers. They recorded Heartbreak Hotel, a sad song released later that month. Elvis quickly appeared 6 times on CBS's stage show, starting January 28th. He stayed in New York to record hits like Blue Suede Shoes. In February, his earlier Sun recording, I Forgot to Remember to Forget, hit #1 on the country charts. Around this time, Colonel Tom Parker took over as his manager from Bob Neal. On March 23, 1956, Elvis's first album was released by RCA. It mixed new songs with older Sun tracks, blending country, pop, and rhythm and blues. The hit Blue Suede Shoes showed the bold new sound Elvis was creating, a sound that would change music forever. With this album, Elvis moved from hopeful newcomer to music legend in the making. Lost in fame, found in music again. Elvis Presley was a huge star, but even the greatest can face tough times. In the late 1960s, Elvis, the king of rock and roll, felt lost. His career was slipping, and he was losing interest in his music. Instead of the songs he loved, he was stuck singing movie soundtracks that didn't feel real to him. Between January 1967 and May 1968, he released 8 singles, but only 2 made it into the top 40, and they barely climbed to number 28. His albums were also losing fans, with one, Speedway, barely reaching number 82. Elvis no longer seemed like the happy, lively performer he once was. His music felt distant, and the rock and roll energy that had made him famous was fading. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, saw this too. He decided to try something new, a TV special with NBC. At first, it was just meant to be a simple Christmas show, but director Steve Binder saw that Elvis wanted to feel alive again through music. The special, filmed in Burbank, California, in June 1968, and aired on December 3rd, became known as the 68's Comeback Special. This wasn't just a show, it was a turning point. Elvis appeared in tight black leather, playing his guitar with fire and heart. For the first time in years, he sang live in front of an audience, performing both his old hits and newer songs with real passion. His voice was strong, his moves smooth, and he seemed to find himself again. The show was a huge success, watched by 42% of the TV audience and becoming NBC's highest-rated program of the season. The special revived Elvis's spirit. The song If I Can Dream, made for the show, climbed to number 12 on the charts. The album also did well. Elvis was finally free to sing music he loved and express himself again. In January 1969, Elvis returned to live shows, performing at the International Hotel in Las Vegas to excited fans. He quickly followed with sold-out concerts at Houston's Astrodome, setting new attendance records. He wore flashy jumpsuits that made his stage presence even more electric. The crowds were wild, so much so that during one show, 50 National Guardsmen were called to keep order. But danger wasn't far away. In August 1969, while performing in Las Vegas, Elvis received a serious death threat demanding money. The FBI got involved. Brave as always, Elvis didn't cancel the show. He carried firearms hidden in his boot and waistband, but performed without any problems. His live shows gave him new energy. Hits like The Wonder of You topped the UK charts and did well in the US too. The documentary, Elvis, That's the Way It Is, captured the magic of his concerts and the joy he felt while performing. Elvis had once felt lost in a world of fading fame and music that didn't feel true. But by returning to the songs he loved, connecting with his fans, and embracing his real self, he found happiness again. It was music, not fame, that saved him and brought him back to life. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.